A mother orca carried her dead calf for 17 days. She refused to let his body sink. Again and again, as he slipped beneath the waves, she dove after him, lifted him back to the surface, and pushed him up toward air he could no longer use. 1,000 miles of open ocean and one dead calf she would not let go. Scientists tracked her the entire way, and many of them reached for a word they'd been trained never to say about an animal: grief. We tell ourselves that grief belongs to us alone, the one ache too deep for anything but a human heart. But she is one of many reasons we are wrong. For most of history, we told ourselves a comforting story, that real grief was a uniquely human burden, that animals might feel fear or hunger, but not the deep, aching loss that comes from loving something and then watching it disappear. But over the last few decades, a quiet field of science has emerged to study exactly this. It's called comparative thanatology, the study of how animals respond to death. And what researchers keep documenting again and again is impossible to wave away. Across the animal kingdom, creatures are grieving their dead, and some of them do it in ways that look heartbreakingly familiar. Nowhere is this clearer than with elephants. Researchers who have spent decades in Africa watching wild elephant families have recorded something extraordinary. When an elephant dies, the others do not simply move on. They gather around the body, they fall silent. They reach out with their trunks and touch the face, the tusks, the bones, gently, deliberately, the way you might touch the hand of someone you've lost. They stand vigil for hours, sometimes days. They have even been seen covering the bodies of their dead with branches, leaves, and soil, something disturbingly close to a burial. And here's the part that's hardest to explain away. Elephants return. Years after a family member has died, they will come back to the place where the bones lie and touch them again. A scientist named McComb at the University of Sussex tested this directly. She found that elephants show far more interest in the skulls and tusks of other elephants than in the remains of any other animal. They recognize their own dead. They seem to remember who they were. Move on to our closest relatives, and it becomes even more intimate. Chimpanzee mothers whose infants die have been seen carrying the tiny bodies for days, sometimes weeks, refusing to put them down long after the body is gone. Groups of chimps will gather quietly around one of their dead, touching it, grooming it, sitting in a stillness that observers can only describe as mourning. But perhaps the most haunting case comes from Jane Goodall, who spent her life among the chimpanzees of Gombe. She watched a young chimp named Flint lose his mother, an old female called Flo. After Flo died, Flint stopped eating. He pulled away from the others. He climbed back to the empty nest where he had last been with his mother, and he lay down in it. Within a month, this otherwise healthy young chimpanzee was dead. Goodall believed he died of grief, his body simply giving up on a life that no longer had his mother in it. And the list only keeps growing. Dolphins have been seen holding the bodies of their dead calves at the surface, keeping them afloat for days. Gorillas gather to sit with and groom their dead. Even giraffes have been recorded standing guard over a lost calf long after it was gone. And it isn't only the large, brainy mammals. Crows hold what researchers have genuinely come to call funerals. When a crow dies, other crows gather around the body, calling loudly, drawing more and more of them to the scene. A scientist named Kaeli Swift at the University of Washington studied this behavior closely. Part of it is practical. The crows are learning, memorizing the place and the danger so they can avoid the same fate. But that isn't the whole story. The crows return to their dead. They pay attention in a way that goes beyond simple caution. These are birds, with brains nothing like ours, and yet they too stop and gather and mark the passing of one of their own. Now here's where scientists get careful, and it's the part almost nobody talks about. For a long time, researchers were terrified of a single word: anthropomorphism, The sin of projecting human feelings onto animals. To say an elephant grieves or a chimp mourns was seen as unscientific, sentimental, even embarrassing. So for decades, the evidence was quietly ignored. But it kept piling up until it became harder to explain the grief away than to simply admit it. And that forces a genuinely uncomfortable question. If grief appears in creatures as different as whales, elephants, apes, and crows, then maybe grief was never a human invention at all. Maybe it is something far older. Because grief, when you strip it all the way down, is simply the cost of attachment. It's what love leaves behind when the one you loved is gone. And attachment, the bond between a mother and her child, between members of a group, is not remotely unique to us. It exists everywhere. Life is social, which means the capacity to grieve may be woven into the very fabric of the living world. And there's something strangely comforting in that. We tend to treat our own grief as a problem to be fixed, a weakness, something that should pass quickly so we can get back to normal. But look at what these animals are showing us. The orca who would not let go, the elephant returning to the bones, the chimp who could not go on. Their grief is not a malfunction. It's the other side of love, the shadow it casts. You cannot have one without the other. To grieve is simply to have loved something enough that its absence rearranges you. And that is not a flaw in you or in them. It may be one of the truest things any living creature is capable of. So think again about that mother orca, carrying her calf across 1,000 miles of cold water, unwilling to accept a goodbye she never chose. For 17 days, she showed the entire world something we keep forgetting. That love does not end cleanly. That loss is felt deeply by far more of this planet than we ever gave it credit for. So when you lose someone and the grief nearly breaks you, understand this. You are not being weak, and you are not alone in some uniquely human suffering. You are joined in that moment by every elephant standing over bones, every crow circling its fallen, every mother of every species who has ever refused to let go. Grief is the price of love. And it turns out we have always been paying it together. Thanks for watching the Unspoken channel. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Until next time.